Hello, and welcome to Top Voice Tuesday on September 16th. I am excited to be joined by Jenny Fernandez. We are going to talk about a topic that never goes out of style, leadership today. And I was inspired by a post Jenny did a while back about leadership not being a straight line. And that's going to be our conversation today. For those of you tuning in, please do let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to follow us and subscribe to the podcast and the newsletter that comes out after this show. So, Jenny, as is customary on this show, we start with the same question. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain?
Great. No, thank you so much, Michael. Again, really excited to be here and to speak to your audience. Again, my name is Jenny Fernandez. I am a leadership coach, educator, and a lifelong learner. And what I mean by that, I am somebody who's not afraid to face day one in many situations. So I'm actually pursuing my doctoral, degree at the University of Southern California. So I'm starting my second year. Super excited about, crossing that milestone. And I just got my chair assigned. So it makes it real. Now the real work begins, doing my research and creating something amazing that can help, me contribute more and more to my followers, my communities. And really going back to your question, how did I get to be a top voice here in LinkedIn? It's really because I am someone who's always looking to add value. So I have been a lifelong learner. I went to Columbia University as an undergrad. I had two different degrees. I created a portfolio career as a result of all of that. And I'm someone who realizes that we really need to build community and be connection. And this is what really helps us be successful. So I always try to empower my followers with knowledge, motivation, and frankly, just again, tips and strategies for them to build kind of a connected community that is going to allow them to continue to get new jobs, pivots, and reach new heights. So all of that is really what I think helped me stand out and be someone who was recognized. And if you follow me, and I offer anyone who's listening to please do, I create a lot of content on Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, where I'm an avid contributor. I also have different channels, whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I'm trying to drive more video, so you might see a lot more of me real time. And this is really what drives me. I want to be able to help people. I want to make an impact at scale.
That's great. And that theme has come through in everyone that's been on this show. It's about giving and it's about contributing and it's really about giving without expectation of return. And I think you embody that principle. Your career has been a dynamic one. And actually, before we get into that a little bit, you interviewed me for your research. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what your research is and what your doctoral focus is.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I remember. It's so funny how everything is full circle. So my program is at University of Southern California. It's called Leadership OCL, Organizational Change and Leadership. And my specific dissertation studies is going to focus on basically speaking to the C level, so chief learning officers, CHROs, CEOs, to understand how we can help organizations to reskill the workforce in the age of AI. All we keep listening in the news is unfortunately the productivity and performance side, how AI is impacting jobs, a lot of layoffs. But organizations are soon going to need to pivot and focus on innovation and growth. So, how do we reskill the workforce to be ready for that change? Because let's face it, organizations cannot grow as a result of productivity. They have to grow as a result of, again, innovation, new ideas. And for that, we need a skilled workforce.
Yeah. You should listen to the episode last week with Jeff Frick. We talked about this very topic. We've had several conversations about AI on this show, and obviously it's a big topic, and we'll be excited to see your research when it comes out. And I would assume if you have other people that you want to talk to, please do reach out in the comments or reach out to Jenny after the show. She's done a lot of amazing work. So let's talk about your career arc before we talk about leadership, because I think so much of our leadership style comes from the experiences that we have.
Yes.
You started out, you've gone from CMO to a coach to now a professor pursuing your own doctorate. When you look back, what were some of the big pivots in your career, and how has that influenced your view on leadership?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. So, one of the big pivots in my career was when I decided to go abroad and become an expat. So, I had been, one fantastic kind of had a fantastic career here in the US. And as many leaders who are listening, we tend to focus on what is in our preview. So, the traditional kind of career where you're working very hard, you're driving a lot of outcomes, you're having an impact on performance, on people, yet you think that the ladder only goes up,
Mm,
right? So I decided to ask myself, literally, I had this question: how do I leapfrog
mm,
my so-called competition or others, so the trajectory? How do I continue to move ahead in a way that is differentiated? Because sometimes, as a woman, as a Latina, I may not be offered the same opportunities that other people get. Again, not in the I'm not like absolving myself from my trajectory, but I'm saying maybe I didn't know how to network enough, or I didn't know some of the steps that I needed to do. I didn't have the right sponsors, for example. So whatever is the situation that you're facing, you have to ask yourself, why do I have to follow the traditional path? How do I leapfrog? Many people, especially millennials and now Gen Zers, are becoming founders, and they're doing their own companies. In my time as a Gen Xer, that may not have been as available, but I said to myself, you know what, going abroad to the fastest growing region, China at the time, Asia Pacific, was going to really empower me to have a differentiated career, build it as a global leader, as somebody who was ahead in the marketing, digital marketing space. So all of this really led me to have that first pivot that really catapulted my career.
I I've heard this before of people that have worked overseas. I never have, and I wish I had. Is there's a central element of what you just described, which is the courage to step out into a new experience. And so you've said that leadership isn't a straight line. You did a post on this,
Yeah.
which is what inspired the title of this show. And I just love that phrase because I think you've mentioned we're both Gen Xers. Nobody talks about us anymore, but we're still here. Is we all grew up with an idea that you grow up, you get a job, you work in that job for 20, 25 years, you progress through a process of increasing responsibility, and then you're a leader. But we know that that's not how the real world works. So, why do you believe these kind of detours, your pivots, other pivots you're seeing, why do you think they're essential to becoming a leader?
Yeah, no, I think they're essential because they help you get out of your comfort zone. First of all, sometimes we know what we're good at. We're right. We're great performers. We'll be great with people management, and we stay in that same lane. But so is everybody else, right? So you really have to find out how can you create a career, a reputation that says, you know what, Jenny or Michael are the right leaders when we're facing this other type of problem. And I feel like what is happening right now, especially because of technology advancements that are happening, whether it was the internet revolution and e-commerce, and now with Gen AI, is that you need leaders who are able to be curious, are able to learn on the job, are able to bring others along and to inspire others to navigate uncertainty. And I think you only do that when you put yourself in a place where you're learning again. So you need to build that resilience by stepping back and saying, "Hey, I need to get experience in a different lane. I already covered this lane. I'm an expert here. But how do I continue to add to my leadership toolkit so that I am differentiated and ready for the future?"
That's in addition to the word courage. you've mentioned resilience, and now you've mentioned learning. Those are three good attributes of what I consider to be a great leader. I know that what we struggle with, particularly as we get older, and this is not an ageist comment, it just means as we get older and we become more expert at something, the idea of not being good at something can be very
Yeah.
intimidating. It can be very frustrating. We hear about imposter syndrome, and so as a coach, how do you help leaders navigate those transitions? And maybe just to give a little example, one of the things I do with people that I'm coaching or helping is, when we get promoted, we don't know the new job, we know the last job. And a lot of people who move into new roles struggle with the skills I had in my old job that got me promoted are not the skills that I need in my new job in
Yes.
whatever capacity I've changed. So how do you help people through that transition where uncertainty really increases?
Yes, yes, that's something that all of us face. And frankly, I think some of the pieces of advice that I give are, first of all, addressing your mindset. That as a leader, your job is not to know everything. Your job is to empower the people that you manage so that they can problem solve themselves. So I think it's changing the mindset and realizing that you're not a doer. That's not why you got a big job. You're not a doer anymore. You're really doing through others. So I think that initial kind of self-awareness, enhancement, and realization helps them realize that it's not like they're breaking their identity. Their identity is changing and evolving because now they have a bigger role or a bigger job. And I think once they realize that, they're able to let go some of that fear or insecurity and really have a growth mindset. Because when we embrace that growth mindset, as you know, Carol Dweck, if anybody listening, a fantastic book to read, kind of growth mindset, is this idea that we're always open and willing and able to learn. That doesn't mean that we are not an expert. That doesn't mean that we are decreasing our leadership or our status. It just means that we realize when we have to step back and become a sponge again. And I think that's something that many leaders sometimes struggle because they feel that the reputation is tied to knowledge.
Mm,
And you have to realize that that's not the case. As you grow in your careers, your reputation is tied more to relationships. So the people how you can build bridges, break silos, and also to problem solving, right? How do you empower your people who you now manage, or your cross-functional team to problem solve for you, right? To drive the initiatives forward. And that is a very different mindset and something that I think, again, comes back to realizing what exactly is your role so that you understand how you need to step in as a leader.
yeah. I One of the things I've heard a lot from people that I've coached over the years or that I've worked with, or even in my own growth as a leader, and I want to come back to this, what is a leader, because I think we're dancing around a topic that we need to define a little bit more. Is, for most of us younger in our careers, we are our value is defined by what we produce. how
Yes.
many how many slides did I do? How many calls did I take? How many projects did I lead? Whatever the metric is. And when you become a leader, the the results are less tangible.
Yeah.
And I've heard people come back at the end of a day and go, "What did I do today? I didn't make anything." And I think that kind of shift is what you're describing. So, have you heard those kinds of stories? And what do you tell people when they're feeling like, wow, my value no longer is tied to output, but it's tied to something different?
Yeah, no, that's and thank you for bringing that up. Again, it goes back to really understanding, I think, your role and responsibility, and going back to what have you set as a strategy, for yourself and your business, right? So, what does good look like at the end of the year? So that is something that I always ask my coachees, the people that I'm working with, because if they have very clear goals, they know at any moment in time what do they need to do in order to progress on those goals. And frankly, I think that, as you mentioned, the doing, that checklist, is something that really drives us nuts because we're used to being recognized by the to dos, right? All of the things that you did. But you have to realize, as Stephen Covey said, right? It is really about making sure that the important things get on your calendar, not just all the little things.
Mm,
So whether it is you have to drive the strategy, right, for the business, for example, you have to create a new redesign of the organization because AI is having an impact on the roles and responsibilities and the jobs, the seats. All of that is more strategic and thinking, kind of in the thinking space, and that requires time. You're not going to, at the end of the day or even the week, say, "Oh, I checked all of these things." Not exactly. You're thinking. You're creating ideas. You may create a flow chart, but it's about understanding what are the milestones. Who do you need to sell this idea to, right? What are the derailers that can happen, and how do you address that? For example, what are the silos that this new organizational design may be creating? All of that is more strategic in nature, less about the specific to do. It still is an outcome, but I think it needs to be redefined in a way that maybe you're creating a smaller milestones so that you feel and realize when you're making success, right? It could be in the way of a timeline and realizing when do I have to present this idea to my boss and key stakeholders. That is an outcome and something that you can check off a list. So I think it's just realizing again as a leader, what are the big goals that you have in your plate? When do you have to communicate? Because that's a big one, right? Communicate, sell the idea. And what are the platforms in the organization or externally that you can use to show progress and success? Because that's what we need to keep self motivated.
yeah. It's interesting as you're describing this. I want to lean back on the title of this show, which is leadership being a straight line. I think a lot of what, well, let me just ask the question differently. I think we're assuming what a leader is in a very linear way of a leader is somebody who's in a company who has direct reports. But I'm curious about your definition of what is a leader, and is there more than one type?
Yeah, no, of course. And it's funny because I'm teaching this class at Columbia University called The Authentic Leader. And I asked my class, my students, please raise your hand if you consider yourself a leader. And half of them did, and half of them didn't. And one of them was very generous and actually said, it depends on the situation, right? And so, which is great. It's true. Sometimes, so to me, a leader is right somebody who is willing to step in to fill the vacuum when that leadership when that kind of a I'm using the word leadership again, but that guidance. When you need somebody to guide others, to inspire others, to manage others even as well is needed. And while you may be a leader by title, you don't have to have that title to act as a leader. One of the big things that I tell people who are looking to get promoted, whether it is to the first manager role or to the executive role or the CMO role, is that you need to act like if you have the job already and have that title.
Yeah, we got. There's a. You're not in any fire danger, are you?
No,
There's a.
I'm in New York City, so
The sounds.
welcome to the city noise. I apologize. That will
That's
pass
okay.
me
That's
in a
okay. I want to make
second.
sure you're okay. I heard a story once, and it's my favorite definition of leadership that I've ever heard. Actually, I have two, but I'll share the first one, which comes from the Navy SEALs. And when they talk about their missions and their operations, what they say is whoever knows what to do next and is
Yeah.
willing to take the next step is the leader. It's not about your rank. It's about an understanding of the moment and what's required, number
Yes.
one, and the willingness to act. And I think that really, for me, was such a great reminder of we have so many fancy definitions of leadership. But the truth is, it's about moments. And it's do I recognize the moment that's required for me to step forward? I love you use that phrase. Who's willing to step forward? And I have another great definition of leadership that I heard from a mentor of mine years ago when I was a kind of a young senior associate at Booz Allen. I had just gotten promoted into a real leadership role. And and he said, look, it's, do people follow you? And I think that was such a simple way of saying, do you command a level of respect? And I don't mean that in an authoritative way, but people recognize you're willing to step into the moment. And so often leadership is about rank, and I don't know that that's really what it is. We are a social species. We like to feel that we're inspired. You've used that word several times. So let's talk about the jagged path of leadership, and maybe what role setbacks play in the journey of leadership. And we talked about pivots, which are
Yeah.
maybe more intentional adjustments, but what role does failure and feedback play in the leadership journey?
Yeah, no, I feel that unfortunately, many times people wait until they face a setback in order to reassess their careers and even their leadership. So I think, those detours that we take because of a setback are really critical in as we grow as leaders. I don't know, Michael, if you have heard the CEO from NVIDIA. He had a talk with Stanford, I think Stanford students, and one of the things that he said is, "I wish you hardship."
Yep.
Because leaders grow as a result of those resilient moments, those setbacks where you have to step back and ask yourself, how do I navigate this? How do I grow from this? How do I learn and pivot from this? And this is something that, again, many times we wait until it happens to us. But if you are managing your career proactively, you create those moments yourself and you become right the originator of that. That's what I did when I decided to apply for my doctoral program. I asked myself, I am not creating, I don't have a detour or a setback happening at the moment, but I see how Gen AI is going to create this for many, many people at scale. How can we empower them? And this is kind of what drove that fuel for me to go back to school, which is I know it's not easy, but it's something that I felt, again, as we talked about, there's a vacuum. How do we step in to fill that so that we can inspire, enable, and help others who are going to need that guidance in order to pivot their careers? And that basically is something that I created for myself because I felt this is something that is going to help me get ready for the future and is going to put me in a position, hopefully, of power to help others at scale.
Yeah. I say this to my clients a lot. You used a phrase. I say the growth is in the struggle. And as a leader, if you want to be a manager, managers, I this is the big distinction I make between managers and leaders.
Yeah.
Managers are responsible for the efficiency of a given process or known situation, making sure I don't deviate from a known pattern. Leaders are people who walk into uncertainty and are willing to figure it out. And I think you've hit on something that's a central component of my book around change. You can see a picture of it behind me, which is embracing stress and intentionally inducing
Yes.
stressful, difficult moments in your life. It is the only way that you change. And I think you're telling us in not so specific terms that if you want to be a leader, you've got to seek these moments out.
Oh, yes, yes, 100%. You need to be the source, right? Many times during our lifetime, we have milestones that are created for us. We go to school, university, we may go back to our MBA. Learning is a big way for you to challenge yourself and become a beginner, right? And put yourself in a space where you have to learn again. And so that's kind of why I created that for myself again. But when you are creating that's becoming that source, whether it is stepping out of your comfort zone to grow your network, or to pivot into a new job, or to become a founder and create a new company, this is something that is going to help you grow. And even if you are not quote unquote successful, you're going to learn from it, right? And this is something that I advise everyone to start doing more and more.
Yeah. There's a phrase in there that I think is one I'm going to start using, which is leaders are people who are willing to continuously become beginners,
Yes.
because you're willing to start over. And look, I was 50 years old and started my my individual company for the first time. I had been in a career for
Yeah.
25 years, and it was one of the most growth oriented moments of my life. And there's another phrase in there that you mentioned that I think is really important about setbacks. And I say this to my athletes all the time. I coach football, which is there can be no comebacks without setbacks. And
Yes.
what would life be if everything was just a linear progression of known activities and they all happened on schedule and everything was fine? That would be completely uninteresting to me as a person. Once I know the outcome of a situation, I become uninterested. I want the moment of uncertainty. I really thrive on that. Sometimes probably a little too much, but it's one of those things that you mentioned. Let's seek it out. So we're kind of coming up to the end here, and I want to talk about the next generation, because you are spending time with young students who are in school. And look, let's just be honest, it's a turbulent time to be a young person. It's a turbulent time to be in school as a young person. What are the themes and the challenges that this next generation are now contending with?
Yes, unfortunately, as you know, as we see in the kind of the workplace, it's a little bit challenging right now to obviously enter the workforce for the first time, because Gen AI is really having an impact on those early career jobs, automating, all of the data entry, all of the different, maybe a little bit more manual activities that we did, but that really created a platform for us to learn, right? Like, even though we hated it, you need to know the numbers, the data in order to learn the foundation of making a decision. So I think the challenges that we're seeing right now, both on the workforce, so organizations and institutions, have to evolve. They have to evolve and ask themselves, what do the students, the young adults, need to learn in order to be ready to, I would say, to adapt a little bit more faster, to become problem solvers, to think on their feet, to, as you said, not be afraid of setbacks and really kind of create more. Right now, students have been taught, I think, a little bit more in terms of following guidance. This
Hmm.
is what you need to do. But AI is faster, better at doing that, right? Because it learns from prior data. So I think what students may need to kind of rethink about learning is really, and actually I talk about it in my TED Talk, which is this idea of healthy friction, creating moments where they have to learn on the job, problem solve. And I feel like this is where organizations need to do as they redesign the workforce. Think about, how can I teach the new generation of leaders coming into the organization to elevate again faster, to get to those management jobs faster, to innovate faster, so that they're leveraging AI, Gen AI, as a tool for growth and iteration versus just decreasing by half, which we're seeing right now. The number of new entry level jobs has been cut by half in many organizations. So you're seeing the age of the organization become older because boomers are staying longer and there's less younger people growing. But let's face it, we need to develop and grow the new generation of leaders in order for the organizations to grow. So I think both schools and institutions have to, organizations have to realize that they have to redesign the workforce and the jobs as well.
Yeah. We had a funny conversation around the dinner table with my son is 17, my daughter's 12. We have little babies too, but about what do I do when I don't need to remember the 50 states and capitals anymore? It's sort of a silly thing to have to memorize, because I've got now really infinite knowledge, almost infinite knowledge at my fingertips. And I think you're reminding us that it's about adaptation, it's about learning, it's about experimentation, it's about understanding how to ask the right questions. And maybe this goes back to the idea that leaders are people who are willing to constantly be beginners, and it's really a great reminder. So this is just I mean, we could talk about leadership forever. If you had to distill down maybe the two or three things that you want the audience to take away from this conversation about leadership not being a straight line, what would you remind people of or have them focus on?
Yeah, so I would say, again, don't be afraid to take detours. right? You need to create a source of new opportunities for yourself, and you need to build new experiences so that you're adding to your leadership toolkit. So that idea of becoming adaptable and comfortable with uncertainty is like two words that don't go together. But become comfortable with uncertainty is something that I think we all need to do because we need to de-risk our careers. So this is why I say that, and this is applicable both to experiences and to connections. When you do a self audit of your network, who do you have in your network? If they all look and feel like you, whether it's the same function, job, industry, then you are putting too much risk in that space.
Mm.
So I feel like this is something that you have to, as the NVIDIA CEO mentioned, look for ways to create tension in a way that is healthy so that you can grow.
I love that, and it's such a perfect reminder. As we wrap up, we have a closing tradition that I stole from another podcast because I love it and I think it's great, which is a bonus question that's left for the next guest from the previous guest. And so the question that was left for you is: if you had unlimited power, and I don't mean like metaphysical power, I mean like actual energy, right? Power, energy to fuel creation, and unlimited labor, what would you build? What would you create?
Unlimited power and unlimited labor. That is fantastic. So I think I would create, I guess, ways for people to enhance their knowledge.
Mm.
So there's power in knowledge, not just because of what you know. As you said, we don't have to memorize anything anymore, but it opens up how you think. It teaches you how to think, to problem solve, and all that we want, for our children, our friends, ourselves, is the ability to face uncertainty and have the confidence that we can figure it out.
This sounds like Neuralink. Maybe you got to go into the competitive space and uh, try to build that sooner. So Jenny, I want to thank you for your time today. We could keep going. For those of you that want to follow more of what you do, Jenny, where can we find you beyond LinkedIn? How can people get in touch?
Yes, thank you for that. So the two biggest ways to follow me outside of LinkedIn is my Substack. So that's Jenny Fernandez at Substack.com, and also my website, jennyfernandez.com. There you can see all of the links to my social media. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a lot more video and live streams to talk about this specific topic. How do we face the new uncertainty of Gen AI and become empowered around it?
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. For everyone listening in, thanks for tuning in to the podcast and the LinkedIn Live today. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the past episodes, I'd love for you to subscribe to my Focus Friday newsletter. We do each week, we do a recap of this conversation plus some bonus insights and other key discussions, as well as a setup to do a quick preview of what's happening next week. And you'll find that link in my show notes on YouTube and on the podcast. Thank you again for being part of the Top Voice community, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks.